So I spent about 42 and a half years of my life running from God, sprinting from God, really. I'm 44 now, and if you wanted a poster boy for just an absolute loser over these last 10 years, you can look in the dictionary. My face should absolutely be in there. I moved to Indianapolis about 10 years ago. I'm from Springfield, Missouri, originally. The Springfield, Houston, Missouri is actually where I went to high school. The Branson area, anybody familiar with Springfield, Branson area? Okay. Yep, that's where I'm from. So I moved here for a job and for a girl. Job worked out, girl didn't. But eventually it did. I've now been married for close to 8 years next month. And so we're celebrating that anniversary. But I was drinking on and off from the time I was like 12 years old, probably. Way too much, 12, 13 years old. And a lot of people have done that, right? I mean, you know, being in America and there's alcohol everywhere when you're a teenager, it's obviously around. But it didn't get really, really bad until I moved to Indianapolis about 10 years ago when the girl didn't work out. That's when I started drinking in the mornings. Things got really, really crazy. I thought that I had it under control for quite a while. In and out of AA like crazy. I never wanted to quit for myself, never wanted to quit for God. And until you want to quit for yourself, you're never going to stop doing that. Almost died several times. Got in trouble with the law more times than I can count. And so finally, over these last 3 years or so, it started getting really, really bad. And I've always been a believer, but I never took that plunge into giving my life 100%, God first, 100%. And that's what you absolutely have to do, and that's what we're going to get into today. But I finally got to a point. I've been sober for 413 days, and I count everything. Thank you very much. Best 413 days of my life, but it's also some of the craziest, and we'll get into it. So 414 days ago, I was about 6 days into a crazy bender, and I don't remember any of this. Google Maps tells me the story. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but you know, being in tech, I'll pass on some wisdom. If you look on your Google account and you go to Maps, you can see everywhere that you've been. It shows everything, where your phone's been, right? Over Maps over the last few days, view your history. And for a 2-day stretch there, towards the end, what ended up happening is I don't know, I remember nothing. I saw that I went, so I'm from Westfield, so I saw myself go down Michigan Road, hang out in a Walmart parking lot for 2 or 3 hours. Don't know what I was doing there. Went all the way past St. Louis and back, and ended up in my subdivision in a cul-de-sac in the back seat of my wife's Jeep that I took. And she had to go to work, I just took it. And don't remember a second of it. And so that night, finally, for the 450th time that I'd finally quit, I just dropped to my knees and I just said, I have to renew my mind. And for some reason, Romans 12:2, which has now become my life verse, just hit me like a ton of bricks. So Romans 12:2, you guys are probably familiar. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God. And I just finally decided that I can't do anything on my own. I tried quitting everything on my own so many times, 100 times, and I finally realized that I needed to do that to become a winner because I was an absolute loser. And I'm glad to say that I did a completely 180, and I started putting God first in everything, and we'll get into that as we go further down here. But some of the habits that I had set up, I realized that I had to bury myself in Jesus completely, 100% with absolutely everything. We'll get into it, but I got to a point to where I would talk to God when I was putting on my shoes, when I was brushing my teeth, when I used the bathroom, when I got in the shower, before I went to work, before any of that. And by the way, it was a miracle that I had never gotten fired or laid off at all. Pretty highly functioning alcoholic for as crazy as I was doing. I would wake up in the morning and have 8 to 10 airplane shooters before most people wake up. Would throw up on the side of my house, get going again. And did this was every single day, still worked. I worked from home, thank God, because I wouldn't have been able to be in person and do that. And so then finally, whenever I did get busted, Sanford, you're gonna love this, being a police officer. This is cool. When I finally did get pulled over, I got my DUI on my way home from an AA meeting. How awesome is that? Pretty cool. And so I had expired tags on the van that I was driving, our minivan. And I was just going about my day. You know, I remember everything. I remember the meeting and all of that, but my blood alcohol was 0.33. And that's 4.5 times the legal limit. And so much that the cop actually said, we're gonna do that again. Just because I was actually standing on my feet, I was still upright. And now I have type 1 diabetes, thanks to it. I got a sensor right here on my arm, and every time I even look at bread, I go pump myself up here with some insulin, right? And so I'm saying all of that to say that God had to break me down completely to build me up to where I am today. And I'm so thankful for it. And so once I started burying myself in Jesus, that 413 days ago, I was gung-ho, man. I'm still going. I have not craved anything. I'm on top of my game in absolutely everything that I'm doing here. But the company I was working for laid off 10 people, and I was one of them. And I'm like, hey, I work in IT. This isn't going to be a problem. I'll find a job in 3 weeks. First time I'd ever been laid off. That lasted 7 months. And we have 4 teenagers. We had just built a new house 12 months before in Westfield. So in other words, life is expensive, right? And so every single week, I had no idea where money was going to come from. I almost lost everything 3 or 4 times. It got absolutely crazy, but God always came through. And in that 7 months over this last year, I've never thought more clearly. This diabetes has forced me to be in better shape. I have an awesome diet. I go to the gym every morning at 4:30. I don't miss days. I go. It's changed my life completely. And God did all of that because that's what I needed. Absolutely had to do that. And I've taken it to the workplace. And you guys may know that you can't just walk into your office with the repent and be saved stuff. You just can't. What you need to do, and what you all know, is the way that you live your life for people to look at you and say, there's something different about that. There's something different. What's different with that guy? When they ask, doors wide open. When I tell people I have type 1 diabetes and I got it at 43 years old, that's very rare. You're either born with it, you get it as a little kid, and they're like, how did you get that? You're not a big guy. How did that happen? And you don't want to just come out and say, well, I was a raging alcoholic. That's not a good conversation starter. People judge, right? They just do. It's human nature. But anyway, it opens the door for that. And so, long story short, that's my story. There's a lot of crazier stories, but that sets the baseline for just how absolutely stupid that I was. And so, I've got 6 points here. It's not a long 6-point sermon, I promise you. This is going to be like 20 minutes. When you hear a 6-point sermon, you want to run out the door, I'm sure. But I've got 6 points here that talks about transforming your mind. So, you all may know this, but our mind has a tactical advantage over us every single day. It's human nature to take the path of least resistance, to do the easy things. That's where doubts come from. That's where fears take root. The average person deals with anxiety and guilt, our past, especially our past. That's one thing now. Whenever I look at my past, I don't look at a loser. I don't see that anymore. When I look at my past, what I see now is an empty tomb. I see a risen Savior. I see absolute victory. And that's why I'm so, it's not a cocky thing, it's a confidence thing that I know that whatever I take on, when I'm soaked in Jesus and I'm following Him this much, I can't lose. I will win at absolutely everything that I do. Not me, but Him. And if I boast, let me boast in filthy rags made clean. That's where I'm at in life right now, man. And so the world molds us. And, with our mind, your mind is going to win all the time. Until you take control of your mind, you're never going to win at anything because it's always going to win. And human nature is to be lazy, especially in our culture. It's real easy to be lazy and still get by. It's real easy. So renewal is the key to everything. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So you need to sweep away complacency. We are born sinners. A more non-PC way to say it is we are born losers with the potential to be awesome winners. Every single one of us was made for a reason, and Jesus came so that we may have life more abundantly. He doesn't want us to be beaten down and be looking at our past and feel guilty and bad all the time. He wants us to win, and we don't have a victory story in our life unless we put Him absolutely first. Solomon, one of my favorite characters in the Bible, he tried absolutely everything. He tried women, he tried money, he tried jobs, he tried all of that, and at the end of the day, he said that all of it was in vain, every single bit of it. In the end is Jesus and Jesus only. That's all that matters. 500 years from now, nobody's going to know who Bryan Crouch is, but my legacy that I pass down to my kid and their kids, it's super important. It's so crazy how quickly that our lives are absolutely forgotten. My pastor asked a question in a sermon a couple months ago that stuck with me, and I think it's pretty crazy. This is how quick people are forgot. Does anybody here just know, you can just say it in your head, your father's grandpa's first name? Not really. If you do, that's very, very impressive. My point is that you will be forgotten, but your legacy will not. And so you got to put Jesus first, because in the light of eternity, that's really all that matters. So point number 3 I want to talk about is escaping conformity. Here in this culture, I feel like that we're all robots. We are. I guarantee you, if you walk up to 10 people on the street and you ask them, why did you get out of bed this morning? Maybe 2 can answer that question. You know, what is your purpose? What are you doing? Do you get up and go to work because everybody else is going to work? Do you have a wife and 2.2 kids because everybody else does? Did you go buy that car because everybody else does? You know, Jesus invites us to blow this idea out of the water. Something that I love about Jesus is the kingdom. The more and more I study it, the kingdom is completely backwards. It's completely backwards. We die to live, right? The more that you die, the more that you live. The more that you give away, the more that you get. The more compassion that you show, the more comes back to you. And compassion is a funny thing. Chris, in our Bible study, we were just talking about it, and it really convicted me this week. The definition of compassion is that whenever you look and you feel bad about something and you're driven to action. Compassion isn't seeing something that makes you feel bad and then you go about your day. That's not compassion. That's just noticing bad stuff in the world and not doing anything about it. When you put Jesus first, you do something about it. It becomes your heart's desire. It burns inside of you. And I see that in the workplace everywhere that I go. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm a talker. I talk a lot, and I know everybody. Like in Westfield, I can go into Kroger, and I know every one of those workers' names without their name tag on. I talk to absolutely everybody. It doesn't matter. I'll talk to a dog if they'll listen. And so... yeah, indeed. I mean, who serves the most will be the greatest, the least will be first. The kingdom is completely backwards, and that's completely different from our culture. And so we need to be thinking about that whenever we go about our lives. Gratitude is super important. I buried myself in gratitude whenever I was doing that. And so I would start every single morning with like a 2-hour walk, and I would go out and I would just talk to God the entire time, praying without ceasing, right? And it sounds crazy. I tell this to people. I would talk to God in my car. I would talk to him when I was walking. I would talk to him in the shower. And it sounds funny. You know, some people, when they think of prayers, they think of it's, you know, the these and the thous, and you're on your knees and you're looking up. And yes, you can pray like that, but praying is just talking to God. He wants that relationship with you. And that's how you can transform your mind as well. But you need to give thanks in absolutely everything. One of my other favorite verses in the Bible is Philippians 4, 6 through 7, that talks about, don't worry about anything, instead pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he was done, and then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything that we can understand. And so really, I broke that down into, don't worry about anything, pray about everything, and yeah, I mean everything, and give thanks for everything that you have. There's a quote that I really, really like here. See if I can find it. Yeah, and it was from Oprah Winfrey a long time ago. And what she said was, when you focus on what you don't have, you'll never have enough. When you focus on what you have, you'll always have more. And that is such a true story. I went through that a lot in my 7 months whenever I was afraid I was going to lose absolutely everything. And just every single day I was like, God, I know that you got this. I know that you got this. Caused a lot of rift between me and my wife, because she's like, why are you so calm during all of this? And I'm like, well, worst case scenario, I die. I got Jesus. She's like, dude, our electricity's gonna get shut off. Like, you need to stop being so cool about this. But over that 7 months, God built a faith in me. Like, I feel like I can't be shaken right now. I am so soaked up in Jesus, in the marketplace, everybody that I'm talking to. So I started a ministry called Conformed to Transformed. I buried myself in Bible studies. Every Wednesday morning at 6, I'm in a Bible study with him. Saturday morning, another one. Tuesday night, men's group. I started a circle at our church on Thursday nights. My life is just Jesus, 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 work, Jesus, Jesus. And, you know, there's family in there, of course. You know, my wife still exists to me. We have a very, very, very good relationship. Throw that out there. She's going to see it on YouTube later and yell at me. But long story short, I had to bury myself in it because nothing else was going to work. I was going to die. Like when I found out I had type 1 diabetes, I went in, I was feeling sick for 4 or 5 weeks. Normal blood sugars in between 80 and 120. I was at 695. They told me if I waited just a few more hours, I probably wouldn't have made it. But I was in a diabetic coma. It took 3 days in ICU to like level me back out. I did some very, very stupid things. And it's unfortunate that it took that much for God to get my attention, but dude, I am sold out now. Like, I am just sold out completely. And it's one of those things you know about him your whole life, but are you really putting him first? Have you really transformed your mind? Do you put God first in every single thing that you do? Prayer is very, very important. That's point number 5 here, and I'll get us wrapped up here pretty quick. And I'll go back to Philippians 4, 6, 7. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need. Thank him for all he has done. Then you'll experience God's peace. So that means, basically, the more time that you spend with God, the more peace that you're going to feel. When you can't pay those bills, when you have a spouse that leaves you, when you have all of these crazy things in your life, you'll have a peace that goes beyond understanding. What does that mean? It's a peace that doesn't make sense. It's just a peace that doesn't make sense. And these are the things that I love witnessing to people in the workplace about, in the marketplace. Whenever they ask about the diabetes or they say, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. I'm like, glad you asked. And so, like I said, the first 44 years of my life I spent for Bryan. The next 44 years, I'm going to spend for him. He's all mine, man, and I'm all his, and both, I guess. But I don't think that we realize in the marketplace how powerful that we can be used when we have Jesus inside of us. I really don't think as human beings we comprehend that the Spirit of God really, literally, legitimately lives inside of us and what that means if we put him first and think from that identity, think from that victory, not a victim's mentality. That's where the devil wants you. He wants you to feel like a loser. He wants you to feel like that you're not enough, but you are enough. God made you. He lives inside of you and he wants to use you, and I want to be used by him. And then unconditional love, which is kind of the hardest one. We all have clients, right? There's some of those, the phone rings and you're like, yeah. I mean, I work in IT, man, trust me, there's tons of them, right? There's great ones and there's not so great ones. But we need to love people the same way that Jesus loved people. I try to think, like, where would Jesus be if he was here today with all of the crazy stuff that's going on in society? And that's one reason that people hated him. He was in the places where he, quote unquote, shouldn't have been. And I feel like that a lot of churches these days, a lot of ministries, we're fishing in an aquarium. We're saving people that have already been saved. We're preaching to people that, I'll be honest, like, don't need it, really. I mean, everybody needs it, but you know what I'm saying. We're not reaching the lost. We're not going out. This is a broken world, and I feel like that the workers are very, very few, and the harvest is crazy plentiful. And I feel like in the workplace, we have a responsibility, like I said, not to go out there with the end is near cardboard sign, but to just live your life in a way to where when people look at you, they say, there is something different about that person. What is it? And whenever they ask, you can say, glad you asked. One of my favorite movies I used to watch with my son was Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith. Do you guys know that movie? I'm sure almost everybody does. But there's a part in that whenever Will Smith's coming up, or he's trying to, he's in his internship, and the president of the company rolls up in that crazy car. Remember, he gets out and Will Smith looks at him and he says, what do you do and how do you do it? Yeah. As Christians, people need to be looking at us and say, who do you know and how do you know him? And I think that's the poise that we need to be coming from. When people see us, we need to be set apart. We are to be set apart. We're supposed to be different. We're not supposed to blend in with the rest of society and conform. That's easy. That's the easy way out. I'm addicted to doing the hard things now. And Chris, you know this, we talked about this. When I started burying myself, I have an hourly reminder on my watch, every single hour on the hour that says, talk to God. Every single hour. And there's some days I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it, and you swipe it away. But it builds that habit, it builds that mindset to every single time that you see it. Sometimes I'll stop and I'll pray for 5 minutes. Sometimes I'll be way too busy and I'll swipe it, but I'm thinking about it. And you do that for 3, 4, 5 weeks, it builds up a habit where you're talking to God all the time. And you may seem like a crazy person, but I don't care. Like, it really doesn't matter. I don't care if people think that I'm crazy, and it'd be crazy to choose this world over eternity. That's what's crazy. And so you just got to build up those little habits within yourself. And so if you do something for the course of 2 or 3 weeks, do that for a year. This is what I've done. And so it's ridiculous. Like when I'm brushing my teeth, I'm praying. It's really, really silly, but it's cool. I'm talking to God all the time. And when you do that, your mind is open and you see these open doors, these wide doors that are just kicked open for opportunities for you to speak to people, reach people, especially in the marketplace. And guys, that's all that I have for you today. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. Thanks for listening to my story, and I really appreciate you guys. Thank you. God bless.